Hi there. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. It's me, Pigeons, and today's video is going to be another psychology chat. So, I've got a new textbook. I have not read from this textbook before on the channel. I usually stick to the same one. But this one is super interesting. Abnormal psychology. This is the field of psychology, along with neuropsychology, that I find the most fascinating and the most interesting. So I've already gone through this textbook and found something quite intriguing that I think a lot of us can relate to, and that is phobias. Phobias. So let's talk a little bit about phobias. And then at the end of the video, I will read through quite a long list of different types of phobias. Some common and some not so common. I do have a phobia of my own. I have a very, very intense fear of flying bugs. Like really bad fear. It holds me back from doing things. And when we go through that list, maybe my fear will be on there, and maybe yours will too. And if yours is on the list, comment down below what your phobia is. Okay, so let's start off with the definition of what a phobia is. A phobia is a persistent and unreasonable fear of a particular object, activity, or situation. People with a phobia become fearful if they even think about the object or situation they dread, but they usually remain comfortable as long as they avoid the objects or thoughts about it. Most are well aware that their fears are excessive and unreasonable. I can really relate to that. If I even think about the sound that bugs make when they're flying close to your ears, I get like this feeling inside of fear and like disgust. And if anything even sounds like remotely close to the buzzing of specifically wasps, it makes me really uncomfortable. Like a sound of a fan that sounds like a swarm of wasps or something. I'm also extremely aware that my fear is excessive. It's quite embarrassing because when I go for hikes with my friends, if there's a wasp, or if I'm outside at all, if there's a wasp or a bug flying around, I am probably screeching, running around them in circles, or sitting on the ground with my ears plugged, because it's the sound that really scares me. Anyways, let's continue. We all have our areas of special fear, and it is normal for some things to upset us more than other things. Also, before I continue on, this textbook is quite out of date. Some of the information might not be the most relevant. This is for entertainment and relaxation purposes, and despite it being out of date, there's definitely some interesting information in these textbooks. Okay, anyways. Oh, this is the Abnormal Psychology 6th edition by Ronald J. Comer. Okay. We all have our areas of special fear. It's normal for some things to upset us more than other things. Perhaps even different things at different stages of our lives. Interesting. So phobias can kind of ebb and flow, or fears can come and go. A survey of residents of a community in Vermont found that fears of crowds, death, injury, illness, and separation were more common among people in their 60s than other age groups. Among 20-year-olds, fears of snakes, heights, storms, enclosures, and social situations were much more common. That's quite fascinating that the older we get, the more common it is to fear situations that are more likely as we get older, such as injury, illness, death. Quite interesting. Okay. So these are common fears, not necessarily phobias. How do these common fears differ from phobias? It is indicated that a phobia is more intense and persistent, and the desire to avoid the object or situation is greater. People with phobias often feel so much distress that their fears may interfere dramatically with their lives. So I can imagine the struggle that those of us with social phobias go through on the daily, trying to keep up with the demands of regular life, needing to go to a job or grocery shopping or just do simple errands can be absolutely debilitating and terrifying for people with social phobias. Most phobias technically fall under the category of specific phobias, which is a severe and persistent fear of a specific object or situation, other than agoraphobia or social phobia. Okay. In addition, there are two broader kinds of phobias, so that one would be a social phobia, the fear of social or performance situations in which embarrassment may occur. So that's why you see people get up on stage and then they just freeze and panic. And then there's agoraphobia, which is a fear of venturing into public places, especially when one is alone. Right? Because agoraphobia is usually, perhaps always, experienced in conjunction with panic attacks. So, moving on, we will talk a little bit more about specific phobias. So, a specific phobia, as we've said, is a persistent fear of an object or a situation, a very specific object or situation. When individuals with these fears are exposed to the object or the situation, they usually experience immediate, intense fear. Common specific phobias are intense fear of specific animals or insects. Heights, enclosed spaces. Oh, I don't like that either, but I wouldn't consider it a phobia. Thunderstorms and blood. Each year, 8.7% of all people in the United States have the symptoms of a specific phobia. More than 12% of individuals develop such phobias at some point during their lives, and many people have more than one at a time, so it is possible to have multiple phobias. And it is possible to develop a phobia at any point in your life. Women with the disorder outnumber men by at least 2 to 1. For reasons that are not clear, the prevalence of specific phobias also differs amongst racial and ethnic minority groups. Wow. The impact of a specific phobia on a person's life depends on what arouses the fear. People whose phobias center on dogs, insects, or water will keep encountering the objects they dread. Yes, it's unavoidable. Their efforts to avoid them must be elaborate and may greatly restrict their activities. So, with my fear of insects, wasps specifically, or flying bugs, I love hiking. Absolutely adore hiking. And I live in Northern Ontario, Canada. So we have all 4 seasons. We have a hot summer and a very cold winter. Very cold, very cold and icy winter. Typically, hiking season would be in the summer. But for me, I love camping. Campgrounds open in May and they close in October, but because of the bugs, I cannot go camping until about the end of August. August going into September, so that gives me like 2.5 months to do any camping at all, and it's usually pretty cold. And hiking, I rarely hike in the summer months because of the bugs, because I'm terrified to have like a bunch of bugs around me, flying around me. So I avoid my favorite activities during the nicest weather because I may encounter wasps, but I probably will. A couple of years ago, 2 years ago, about, I went on a hike. It was the middle of August, and Sabrina and I were standing on this bridge of a trail I had hiked so many times. It was one of my favorites. But I suppose that there was a wasp's nest under that bridge, and we were swarmed with wasps. And I got stung on my thumb. I've never been stung before. And I like blacked out, and I went running, screaming. There was so dramatic, but like there was so many people around too, just like screeching, running down the trail. I've never run this fast in my life. I fell down a muddy hill. I was covered in mud. I lost my glasses and I was just ready to abandon them, and I was screaming. I ran all the way down this trail. Sabrina came up behind me and I was like heaving. It's dramatic. It's very dramatic. And it's embarrassing because I can't control it. Anyways, though, I am too scared to go back to that trail now. I haven't gone back in over 2 years. Anyways, enough about me. Urban residents with snake phobias have a much easier time. The vast majority of people with a specific phobia do not seek treatment. They try instead to avoid the objects they fear. That's also true. I really do not want to get treatment for my fear of bugs, because I think that it would probably be some sort of like exposure therapy, and I don't want to be exposed to them. So anyways, okay. Social phobias. I personally do not have social phobia. I'm not a very social person. I don't go out and socialize a lot. I prefer to spend my time kind of by myself, but I'm not afraid to do so. But I do know a lot of people who suffer with social phobias. So many people worry about interacting with others or talking or performing in front of others. So this could also really affect young people, or just people in general, in schools, in class, where you have a presentation assignment. I always felt so bad for my classmates that used to go up in the front, and you could see that they'd be shaking and terrified and would just clam up. And I think that it's not fair to force everybody into presenting in front of a crowd. I don't think that that's very beneficial for learning. I understand why presentations are a thing, but I don't think that we should force any students or like threaten to take marks away from students who really, really fear presenting. Anyways. A number of entertainers, from the singer Barbra Streisand to the actor Sir Laurence Olivier to the football player Ricky Williams, have described major bouts of anxiety before performing. Social fears of this kind are unpleasant and inconvenient, but usually The people who have them manage to function adequately, some at a very high level. People with a social phobia, by contrast, have severe, persistent, and irrational fears of social or performance situation in which embarrassment may occur. So, I wonder if that would be like the fear of public humiliation. And it's unpleasant for anybody to be subjected to that. I don't know why people humiliate each other publicly. Anyways, a social phobia may be narrow, such as a fear of talking in public or writing in front of others, or it may be broad, such as a general fear of functioning poorly in front of others. In both forms, people repeatedly judge themselves as performing less adequately than they actually do. A social phobia can interfere greatly with one's life. A person who's unable to interact with others or speak in public may fail to perform important responsibilities. One who cannot eat in public may reject dinner invitations and other social opportunities. I know a lot of people who really, really dislike eating in front of others. So, if they're asked out to dinner, like out on a date, they will not go because they're too scared to eat in front of somebody else. My sister doesn't like eating in front of other people or eating on a date. I used to be like that too when I was younger. I used to be afraid for people to watch me eating out in public, especially, or on a date. I'm not like that anymore. I love food. I'll eat anything in front of anyone. But, yeah, I can relate to that. Since most people with this phobia keep their fears secret, their social reluctance is often misinterpreted as snobbery, lack of interest, or hostility. Surveys indicate that 6.8% of people in the United States and other Western countries, around 3 women for every 2 men, experience a social phobia in any given year. Around 12% develop this problem at some point in their lives. It often begins in late childhood or adolescence and may continue into adulthood. Alright, so that concludes the section that describes what phobias are and how to differentiate between a specific phobia and a social phobia. Now, what causes phobias? This is quite interesting because I don't really know why I have this fear of bugs. And I know a lot of people don't know where their fear began or why they are afraid of what they're afraid of. So let's dive into what maybe causes these phobias. Each of the models offers explanations for phobias. Behaviorists believe that people with phobias first learn to fear certain objects, situations, or events through conditioning. Okay. Once the fears are acquired, the individuals avoid the dreaded object or situation, permitting the fears to become all the more entrenched. Behaviorists propose classical conditioning. So, classical conditioning, we can see that in when we train our dogs to do tricks. They learn that if they do a certain action, they get a certain response. So, for example, when I tell my dog to high five, he knows that if he does that action, he will get a treat. So he doesn't fear that action. He doesn't fear being told to high five because he knows that the outcome is positive. Right? But if you've had a bad experience with, say, spiders, then your brain would automatically associate that this outcome will be the same every time you're around a spider. Anyways, as a common way of acquiring phobic reactions, classical conditioning. Here, 2 events that occur close together in time become closely associated in a person's mind, and then the person then reacts similarly to both of them. If one event triggers a fear response, the other may also as well. Okay, so here is an example of a fear acquired through classical conditioning. In the 1920s, a clinician described the case of a young woman who apparently acquired a phobia of running water through classical conditioning. As a child of 7, she went on a picnic with her mother and aunt and ran off by herself into the woods after lunch. While she was climbing over some large rocks, her feet were caught between two of them. The harder she tried to free herself, the more trapped her feet got between the rocks. No one heard her screaming, and she grew more and more terrified. In the language of behaviorists, the entrapment was eliciting a fear response. As she struggled to free her feet, the girl heard a waterfall nearby. The sound of the running water became linked in her mind to her terrifying battle with the rocks, and she developed a fear of running water as well. Eventually, the aunt found the screaming child and freed her from the rocks, but the psychological damage had been done. From that day forward, the girl was terrified of running water. For years, family members had to hold her down to bathe her. When she traveled on a train, friends had to cover the windows so that she would not have to look at any streams. The young woman had apparently acquired a phobia through classical conditioning. In conditioning terms, the entrapment was an unconditioned stimulus that understandably elicited an unconditioned response of fear. The running water represented a conditioned stimulus, a formerly neutral stimulus that became associated with entrapment in the child's mind and came also to elicit a fear reaction. The newly acquired fear was a conditioned response. Okay, interesting. Another way of acquiring a fear reaction is through modeling, that is, through observation and imitation. A person may observe that others are afraid of certain objects or events and develop fears of the same things. This is quite interesting. That's why you'll see mothers who are terrified of mice, and then their children are also terrified of mice because they've seen their mom jump up on the table and scream at the top of her lungs when she sees one. So because this reaction is being modeled to them from somebody that they are essentially learning life and behaviors from or whatever, they assume that the mouse is a terrifying creature that should be responded to in that way, and they develop an intense fear of mice as well. So, consider a young boy whose mother is afraid of illnesses, doctors, and hospitals. If she frequently expresses those fears, before long the boy himself may fear illnesses, doctors, and hospitals. Why should one upsetting experience develop into a long-term phobia? Shouldn't the trapped girl have realized later that running water would bring her no harm? Shouldn't the boy later see that illnesses are temporary and doctors and hospitals are helpful? Behaviorists believe that after acquiring a fear response, people try to avoid what they fear. Of course, whenever they find themselves near a fearsome object, they quickly move away. They may also plan ahead to ensure that such encounters will not occur. Remember that the girl had friends cover the windows on trains so she could avoid to look at streams. People with phobias do not get close to the dreaded objects often enough to learn that they are really quite harmless. Behaviorists also propose that specific learned fears will blossom into a generalized anxiety disorder when a person acquires a large number of them. This development is presumed to come about through stimulus generalization, which is responses to one stimulus are also elicited by a similar stimuli. That's a tongue twister. The fear of running water acquired by the girl in the rocks could have generalized to such a similar stimuli as milk being poured into a glass or even the sound of bubbly music. Perhaps a person experiences a series of upsetting events. Each event produces one or more feared stimuli, and the person's reactions to each of these stimuli generalize to yet another stimuli. That person may then build up a large number of fears and eventually develop a generalized anxiety disorder. Wow. That's quite interesting, that fears can generalize to similar things. So, I mean, perhaps that's what happened with me and bugs. I have always feared wasps. I don't know if something happened with them when I was younger that kind of put the fear of wasps in me, but I'm also afraid of houseflies. I'm afraid of butterflies. I'm afraid of anything that flies. Dragonflies, like any kind of flying bug. Ew. Any kind of flying bug I'm afraid of. And I'm sure I didn't have a bad experience with every flying bug, so I suppose that would be a generalization, right? My fears would generalize too. Oh, but also the sound of bugs. If something is making a low buzzing sound, it scares me too. It sounds like a bug. So then I start to fear the thing that is making the buzzing sound. Really don't like that. Okay. So now we will talk about how phobias are treated, and then we will move on to the list of phobias. So, specific phobias were among the first anxiety disorders to be treated successfully in clinical practice. The major behavioral approaches to treating them are desensitization, flooding, and modeling. Together, these approaches are called exposure treatments because in all of them, individuals are exposed to the objects or situations they dread. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever get treatment for my phobia. People treated by systematic desensitization, a technique developed by Joseph Wolpe, learn to relax while gradually facing the objects or situations they fear. Since relaxation and fear are incompatible, the new relaxation response is thought to substitute for the fear response. Desensitization therapists first offer relaxation training to clients, teaching them how to bring on a state of deep muscle relaxation at will. In addition, the therapists help clients create a fear hierarchy, a list of feared objects or situations ordered from mildly to extremely upsetting. Then clients learn how to pair relaxation with the objects or situations they fear. While the client is in a state of relaxation, the therapist has the client face the event at the bottom of his or her hierarchy, so starting from the least scary thing. This may be an actual confrontation, a process called in vivo desensitization. A person who fears heights, for example, may stand on a chair or climb a stepladder. Or the confrontation may be imagined, a process called covert desensitization. In this case, the person imagines the frightening event while the therapist describes it. The client moves through the entire list, pairing his or her relaxation responses with each feared item. Because the first item is only mildly frightening, it's usually only a short while before the person is able to relax totally in its presence. Over the course of several sessions, clients move up the ladder of their fears until they reach and overcome the one that frightens them most of all. Right. Another behavioral treatment for specific phobias is flooding. Flooding therapists believe that people will stop fearing things when they are exposed to them repeatedly and made to see that they are actually quite harmless. Clients are forced to face their feared objects or situations without relaxation training and without a gradual buildup. The flooding procedure, like desensitization, can be either vivo or covert. When flooding therapists guide clients in imagined feared objects or situations, they often exaggerate the description so that the clients experience intense emotional arousal. In the case of a woman with a snake phobia, the therapist had her imagine the following scene, among others, which I'm not going to read because it's quite descriptive, and if any of you out there experience a phobia of snakes, I do not want to cause you any fear. So, in modeling or vicarious conditioning, it's the therapist who confronts the feared object or situation while the fearful person observes. The behavioral therapist acts as a model to demonstrate that the person's fear is groundless. After several sessions, many clients are able to approach the objects or situations calmly. In one version of modeling, participant modeling, the client is actively encouraged to join in with the therapist. Clinical researchers have repeatedly found that each of the exposure treatments helps people with specific phobias. The key to success in all of these therapies appears to be actual contact with the feared object or situation. In vivo desensitization is more effective than covert desensitization. In vivo flooding more effective than covert flooding. And participant modeling more helpful than strictly observational modeling. Many behavioral therapists now combine features of each of the exposure approaches. In addition, a growing number of therapists are using VR. A useful exposure tool. Wow. So, now it's time to go through this whole list of phobias. And I'm going to do my best to read them correctly. Let me know if you have any of these common or not so common phobias. And if you learned the scientific name for it for the first time today. Alright, let's get started. Animals. Zoophobia is the fear of animals. Pogonophobia is the fear of beards. Phobophobia is the fear of being afraid. Hematophobia is the fear of blood. Bibliophobia is the fear of books. Ecclesiophobia is the fear of churches. Necrophobia is the fear of corpses. Gephyrophobia is the fear of crossing a bridge. Ochlophobia is the fear of crowds. Acluophobia or nyctophobia is the fear of darkness, a very common fear. Demonophobia is the fear of demons or devils. Cynophobia is the fear of dogs, another common one. Pediophobia is the fear of dolls. Pharmacophobia is the fear of drugs. Claustrophobia, a super common one that most of us know, is the fear of enclosed spaces. Omatophobia is the fear of eyes. Pyrophobia is the fear of fire. Antilophobia is the fear of floods. Anthophobia is the fear of flowers. Aerophobia is the fear of flying, another common fear. Homiclophobia is the fear of fog. Fog is creepy. Dorophobia is the fear of fur. Spermophobia is the fear of germs, not what you would think it is. Phasmophobia is the fear of ghosts. Theophobia is the fear of God. Taphophobia is the fear of graves. Thermophobia, the fear of heat. Acrophobia is the fear of heights, another common one. An unfortunate fear is homophobia, the fear of homosexuality. Is that even a real fear? Hippophobia is the fear of horses, not hippos. horses. Cryophobia is the fear of ice and frost. Entomophobia is the fear of insects. Mechanophobia is the fear of machinery. Gamophobia is the fear of marriage. Carnophobia, the fear of meat. That's interesting. Musophobia, a common fear, the fear of mice. Isoptrophobia is the fear of mirrors. I've heard of this one before. Chromatrophobia is the fear of money. I don't have that fear for sure. Nyctophobia, the fear of night. Phonophobia, noise or loud talking. Osmophobia is the fear of odors. Hedonophobia is the fear of pleasure. Toxophobia, the fear of poison. Peniophobia, the fear of poverty. Myusiophobia is the fear of pregnancy. Siderodromophobia, the fear of railways. Ombrophobia, the fear of rain. Potamophobia, the fear of rivers. Harpaxophobia is the fear of robbers. Satanophobia, the fear of Satan. Coidophobia or cypridophobia is the fear of having sex. Skyophobia is the fear of shadows. Hypnophobia is the fear of sleep. Oh, what a terrible phobia that must be to have. Ophidiophobia is the fear of snakes. Cyanophobia is the fear of snow. Don't move to Canada if you have cyanophobia. Tachophobia is the fear of speed. Another super common fear. Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. Cnidophobia is the fear of stings. Xenophobia is the fear of strangers. Heliophobia is the fear of sun. Ergasiophobia is the fear of surgery. Odontophobia is the fear of teeth. Hodophobia is the fear of travel. Dendrophobia is the fear of trees. Sphexophobia is the fear of wasps. That's interesting. That's my fear. Hydrophobia is the fear of water. Anemophobia is the fear of wind. Helminthophobia is the fear of worms. Traumatophobia is the fear of wounds or injury. That's definitely not a comprehensive list of all of the phobias that one can experience. I'm sure the possibilities are endless for specific phobias. If your phobia was on this list, let me know, and also let me know if you've had any experience or success with overcoming a phobia. I would love to hear your story. As always, if you enjoyed, please like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Let me know in the comments if you'd like more psychology chats in the future. And be sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in my description for exclusive ASMR content. Alright, I hope you have a wonderful night or a wonderful day wherever you are. Thank you for being here with me. I appreciate you so very much.